Hello and welcome to another tutorial from the hapless historians on the Tudors, and today we're going to look at Henry VIII and essay questions and explore exam techniques for structuring and answering an essay question from section B of your A-level history exam. Thus the aims of the tutorial are to highlight the knowledge, skills and techniques required to address an essay question in the exam, to identify a structure for answering an essay question in the allotted time, to identify techniques to unpack an evidence assessment objective A01, to identify the knowledge to evidence critical analysis, and to identify knowledge and skills to evidence evaluation in the A-level history exam. So to attain ideally a level 5 grade or the next best thing a level 4 grade, you really need to break down the requirements of assessment objective A01. On the exam paper it says your target to evidence is assessment objective 1, which requires you to demonstrate, organise and communicate knowledge and understanding to analyse, and I've put in red what you really need to do, which means to analyse critically, and evaluate, which means to provide an historical evaluation, the key features related to the period studied, making substantiated judgments and exploring concepts as relevant, because they don't always come up all of them in the question, of cause, consequence, change, continuity, similarity, difference and significance, meaning identifying the historical significance of given factors in the question. So, how do you, the student, demonstrate and evidence critical analysis in A-level history? Critical analysis in A-level history is evidenced by demonstrating a critical understanding of the socio-economic, political and religious context of the issue under review. Evaluation by presenting a strong or very strong and very good historical evidence to support your arguments and analysis. By presenting a clear picture of the analysis at the end of each paragraph, identifying why the factors are significant or making links between themes of cause or consequence or historical significance. Don't leave it to the very end of your essay, but at the end of each paragraph. At the end of each paragraph, providing a judgment on the question with little, if any, narrative. There is a tendency for students, and this came up in the examiner's report in 2018 and again in 2022, is that students tend to describe and do a timeline of what's happening rather than actually analysing the issue in terms of its historical significance, or whether it's significant in terms of cause and consequence or change and continuity, and why it's important. What they do is tend to describe, and this gets further and further away from answering the question and is guaranteed to get you a level 3, 2 or even a 1, not a level 4 or ideally a level 5. An outstanding answer will be analytical throughout. An outstanding answer will provide critical analysis of each historical factor identified in the question, and often in the examiner's report they cite how students get focused on one aspect of the question and don't answer it fully by addressing all the historical factors mentioned in the question. It will also provide sustained analysis throughout, and it will develop a clear, relevant and coherent argument. And one of the ways of developing sustained analysis is not only providing an evaluation at the end of each paragraph, but also by either identifying the historical significance of given factors and linking it to A01 themes, but also either presenting an argument and a counter-argument. And in this tutorial, I will be showing you how to do that with a model answer. So let us remind ourselves of why you're putting all your blood, sweat, tears and hard graft into your revision. Ideally, most of you would like to attain a level 5 grade in the exam, which is the equivalent of 21 to 25 marks. So to achieve a level 5 grade, your answer must display a very good understanding of the full demands of the question, and this can only be done by wide reading and looking at what the question is asking you. Your answer will be well organised and effectively delivered. Sometimes students throw in things and it reads like a shopping list when you're actually being asked the significance of a historical factor or the cause and consequences of the events, rather than just describing in terms of a sequence of events what is going on. The supporting information, usually drawn from other historians, there's a little bit of A2 going on in here in terms of being able to evaluate sources either contemporary to the period or later 20th and 21st historians. And so the supporting information will be well selected, specific and precise to the question and the factors you are being required to address in the question. It will demonstrate a very good understanding of the key features, issues and concepts being discussed. And the answer will be fully analytical with a balanced argument and a well substantiated judgment. Similarly, to achieve a level 4 grade, your answer must display a good understanding of the demands of the question, being able to recognise the socio-economic, political, religious, ideological or military context in which the subject is being discussed. It will be well supported and effectively communicated. There will be a range of clear and specific supporting information showing a good understanding of the key features and issues under review. It will also display some conceptual awareness of historical factors. Your answer will be analytical in style with a range of direct comment relating to the question, and the answer will be well balanced with some judgment, which may, however, only be partially substantiated. And usually the difference between a fully substantiated judgment and a supported conclusion or partially substantiated judgment is that the student has not read widely enough all the historical resources and sources on the issue under review. So what is the difference between a substantiated judgment and a supported conclusion? I sometimes glibly, if you've listened to any of my other tutorials on preparation for exams, say the simplistic way to understand it is that a substantiated judgment essay will get you a grade 5 or a level 5, and a supported conclusion is more likely to get you a level 4, but it's a bit more complex than that. A substantiated judgment is one that is supported with very good historical evidence and where relevant reaches a complex conclusion. And I've put here a complex conclusion can be achieved by identifying and analysing each historical factor in the question. And again, this is reported by the examiners in reports of 2022, that often students are very good at identifying one historical factor but missing out key elements of the question and other historical factors. And I will come to that and give you an example when we look at an exam question in a moment. You can also demonstrate a complex conclusion by presenting an argument followed by a counter argument. A supported conclusion is an answer that has a judgment that is backed up with some accurate historical evidence. And the critical analysis, however, is weakened by the fact that there are some gaps in the historical evidence being presented, and it comes back to the fact that the student hasn't read widely enough the key text from your syllabus, including the reference books. Don't just read the reference books for answering an extracts question. You should be familiar with the key authors in given areas. On the Tudors, for example, key on the Reformation are people like Elton, but Christopher Hague, and also John Guy. Other people are very specific in terms of historical personalities, like Henry VIII. Loads is very good on that, and again, so is John Guy. But you should be able to have a good working knowledge of the key research areas of historians writing on the Tudors, certainly if you want to get a level 5. So let us go back to the question. This one is taken from the AQA A-Level History paper from June 2021. It's question 3, which is an essay question from section B, and it says, how successful was Henry VIII's foreign policy in the years 1509 to 1529? And the target is the being able to demonstrate the core A0, or should I say AO, Assessment Objective 1 themes. And I've put here, please note, this is one of those to what extent questions. The first thing you do before you begin to write anything down is you find the content words and the process words. The content words are what the question is about, the subject matter, and the process words are what you need to do with the question in order to attain ideally a level 5 or the next best thing, a level 4, in your A-Level History exam. So, the content words are Henry VIII's foreign policy in the years 1509 to 1529. And this may sound obvious, but sometimes students often miss the second half of a question out. And remember, Henry VIII's foreign policy is classically a game of two halves, as they say in football cliches. From about 1513, from when Wolsey's in charge as First Minister, to about 1520-21, Henry's foreign policy enjoys some major success. But after that it starts to unravel, and in the 1530s and again in the 1540s, various expeditions in France achieve very little. So make sure that you get both parts of the question in terms of the content words and the subject matter, and stay focused on that. The process words are what you need to do with the question to get your level 5 or 4. And it says analyse, and I say don't forget the critical bit, and we've just looked at a slide which demonstrates how to evidence critical analysis at A level and evaluate, and we've also talked about what we mean by evaluation in terms of historical evaluation and how to make substantiated judgments and explore concepts as relevant. Remember, it may be obvious, but students sometimes miss this in the exam when I've looked at scripts, when I've marked as relevant as they come up of cause, consequence, change, continuity, similarity, difference, and significance, meaning historical significance. It's a good idea in terms of your revision to revise thoroughly and identify before going into your A-Level History exam some of the key AO1 themes, and I've identified some here from your syllabus relating to Henry VII's foreign policy. Thomas Wolsey managed the French campaign from the disastrous failure of the first campaign in 1512, so he took the reins in 1513, and this was the cause which secured Henry his first European victory in France in 1513, and that was the consequence, another A01 theme. The key foreign policy challenges for Wolsey as First Minister were A. Establishing a role for England in Europe when it could not match the military or financial resources of France or the Holy Roman Empire. B. Establishing an international role for Henry on parity with Francis I and Charles V. And C. Dealing with the continually shifting balance of power in Europe. All these factors were historically significant for the success and failure of Henry's foreign policy. Henry VIII wanted to establish his international reputation as a Renaissance warrior prince, and again this is AO1 historical significance. Although he obtained territory in Therouanne and Tournai, he wanted to be remembered and echo the victories of Henry V. Well, Therouanne and Tournai were nowhere near on the level of securing Normandy, which is what Henry V had achieved. The 1513 Battle of Flodden seriously weakened Scotland for years to come, another A01 theme of historical significance because Henry successfully broke the old alliance of France and Scotland, which meant that England didn't have to deal with Scotland invading the borderlands in the north at the same time as Henry was dealing with the French in France. Unlike Henry VII, Henry VIII never appreciated England's military and political weaknesses as a second-tier power on the edge of Europe. Consequently, it had neither the military or financial resources to compete with the Valois or Habsburg Empire, and this is a continuing theme throughout the Tudor period and is also historically significant because England always has to think about the potential of invasion from either France or Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. When you come to write your essay in the exam, firstly, think about how much you can write legibly in 40 minutes, allowing for 5 minutes to read and understand the question thoroughly. Most students can write approximately 2.5 to 3 sides of A4, which is about 7 to 8 paragraphs. Now, I've looked at a lot of A-level history exam scripts in the exam, and when I use the word legibly, this is important because although the examiners will do their utmost to mark your scroll if you're writing illegibly, and at times they'll even pass it up to the senior examiner to have a look at it, please remember that on average they are marking 120 scripts a week. And so that gives them about 20 to 25 minutes to reread thoroughly and give it a fair assessment. But sometimes that kind of pressure, if it's badly or illegibly written, it is going to undermine your assignment or essay. So please think about being realistic about what you can write, which is about 7 to 8 paragraphs. The nice thing about doing essay questions, unlike extracts questions, is you don't have to do a little preamble of the socio-political, economic and religious or whatever context in order to evaluate extracts questions. In essay questions, you can just hit the ground running and go straight into addressing the question. So in section 1, which is probably about paragraphs 1 to 4, you present the argument supporting the view that Henry VIII's foreign policy between 1509 to 29 was successful. Then in the second part of your essay, section 2, which is probably paragraphs 5 to 7 or 8, you present the arguments challenging the view that Henry VIII's foreign policy between 1509 to 29 was successful. In terms of the argument supporting the view that Henry VIII's foreign policy was successful in the years 1509 to 29, you could identify that the Treaty of Perpetual Peace was the high point of Henry VIII's aim to achieve an equity of status with Francis I of France and Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, by holding the balance of power in Europe. Cleverly, what Wolsey did in terms of the Treaty of Perpetual Peace was get each individual ruler and nation to sign it independently with England, and that enabled England to hold the balance of power instead of having a conference where everybody sits down and signs the treaty. Henry VIII also secured military success, specifically in the defeat of James IV at the Battle of Flodden and in the second invasion of France, which secured Therouanne and Tournai, as well as a handsome pension for Henry of 75 crowns per year. The Field of the Cloth of Gold in 1520 was a diplomatic success for Henry VIII, and for the first part of his reign, Henry was an ally with the foremost power in Europe, that of Charles V and Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. This was significant in diplomatic terms and in terms of Henry's overall aims to establish an international reputation for himself. Henry achieved his aim in further establishing himself as a chivalric prince by leading his considerable armies into battle in France in 1513. In terms of the arguments challenging the view that Henry VIII's foreign policy was successful in the years 1509 to 1529, you could cite the fact that Henry VIII was unable to establish himself as an equal partner to Francis I and Charles V, as England did not have sufficient wealth. This was most evident following the Battle of Pavia. The Battle of Pavia, 1525, the Habsburg forces with Henry defeated the French, and what Henry wanted Charles V to do was march jointly with him into Paris and then divide France into English and Spanish zones. Henry couldn't do it on his own because he wasn't military, he didn't have the military forces, and also he had a lack of money, and this was evident in the failure of the amicable grant, which Henry had to withdraw because the nobility and the gentry were in arms and he faced a revolution. But he was hoping to use the amicable grant to fund his campaign in France. Henry VIII also failed to make substantive gains in France. Therouanne was a limited achievement and was eventually returned to the French. And remember, he wanted to recreate the territorial gains of Henry V. Well, Therouanne and Tournai by no means matched what Henry achieved at Agincourt, which was taking the province of Normandy. The attempt to forge links with foreign powers and to establish the Tudor dynasty was limited. Princess Mary, that's Henry's sister, married to Louis XII, lasted barely 3 months, and the hands of his daughter Mary was rejected by the French. Henry was frequently used by the Spanish, who did not regard Henry VIII as an equal partner as he hoped. This was evident with the failure of the army sent to Navarre in 1512. Henry VIII was unable to sustain a consistent foreign policy as England was too poor. Henry VIII and his chief minister Wolsey were forced to react to the rivalries of the two major powers, and this was most evident in 1519 because Charles V was elected Holy Roman Emperor and he was duty-bound to reclaim the Habsburg territories in Italy that had been taken by Francis I. So by 1521, despite Henry's success at the Field of the Cloth of Gold, France and the Holy Roman Empire and Spain were at loggerheads again in their Italian Peninsular Wars, and this unravelled the Treaty of Perpetual Peace. In your conclusion, if you want to increase your mark, you can do so by presenting a complex conclusion which suggests a more nuanced or balanced interpretation, like this. Henry VIII's foreign policy in the years 1509 to 1529 was a partial success. Through the Treaty of Perpetual Peace, Henry achieved his main aim of establishing himself the equal of Francis I and Charles V, but this was short-lived. As I said in the previous slide, once Charles V was elected Holy Roman Emperor, he was duty-bound to reclaim Habsburg territory lost in Italy, and this inevitably led to war between France and the Holy Roman Empire, and this dismantled or basically caused Henry's Treaty of Perpetual Peace to unravel. At times, Henry achieved his aims of military success and gained territory, but these territorial gains were limited. Therouanne and Tournai were eventually returned to the French, and remember, Henry's ambition was to recreate the past glories of Henry V. Well, Henry V at the Battle of Agincourt and other military successes gained the whole dukedom of Normandy. Therouanne and Tournai by comparison didn't quite cut it. Henry VIII's aims were unlikely to have been achieved anyway, as England was only ever in the position of reacting to the decision of others and was never wealthy or strong enough militarily to determine continental affairs. That is the end of the tutorial. I hope you found it useful in terms of your revision preparation for your A-level history exam, and specifically in terms of identifying A01 themes and the provision of a coherent essay structure for essay questions. I hope also that you found it interesting, and if you have enjoyed the tutorial, please click the like and subscribe button. Please look out for more short tutorials on the Tudors from the Hapless Historian in the coming weeks, including extracts and essay questions on the Little Tudors, Edward VI and Mary I, and the later and final Tudor monarch Elizabeth I. Thank you for your attention. This is the Hapless Historian signing off.